The 1994 San Marino Grand Prix, formerly the 14 degrees Gran Premio di San Marino, was a Formula One motor race held on May 1, 1994 at the Autodromo Enzo e Dino Ferrari, located in Imola, Italy. It was the third race of the 1994 Formula One World Championship. Fatalities and injuries at this Grand Prix proved to be a major turning point in both the 1994 season, and in the development of Formula One itself, particularly with regard to safety. The race weekend was marked by the deaths of Austrian driver Roland Ratzenberger and of three-time world champion Ayrton Senna in separate accidents. Other incidents saw driver Rubens Barrichello injured and several mechanics and spectators injured. They were the first fatalities in the Formula One World Championship since the 1982 Canadian Grand Prix, and the first with two driver deaths since the 1960 Belgian Grand Prix. Michael Schumacher, driving for Benetton, won the race despite contact with Damon Hill, who dropped to the back of the field and battled back to finish sixth. Nicola Larini, driving for Ferrari, scored the first points of his career when he achieved a podium finish in second position. Mika Hakkinen finished third in a McLaren. The race led to an increased emphasis on safety in the sport as well as the reforming of the Grand Prix Drivers Association after a 12-year hiatus, and the changing of many track layouts and car designs. Since the race, numerous regulation changes have been made to slow Formula One cars down, and new circuits incorporate large runoff areas to slow cars before they collide with a wall. Senna was given a state funeral in his hometown of Sao Paulo, Brazil, where around 500,000 people lined the streets to watch the coffin pass. Italian prosecutors charged 6 people with manslaughter in connection with Senna's death, all of whom were later acquitted. The case took more than 11 years to conclude due to an appeal and a retrial following the original verdict of not guilty. As a result of increased standards in safety following this race, there was a 20-year gap between the deaths of Ratzenberger and Senna, and the crash of Jules Bianchi at the 2014 Japanese Grand Prix, which led to his death the following year. Heading into the third round of the season, Benetton driver Michael Schumacher was leading the World Drivers' Championship with 20 points. Jordan driver Rubens Barrichello was second on 7 points, 13 points behind Schumacher. Behind Schumacher and Barrichello was Damon Hill in third place on 6 points, tied on points with Ferrari driver Gerhard Berger. Berger's teammate Gene Alesi was fifth on 4 points. 1. In the World Constructors' Championship, Benetton were leading on 20 points and Ferrari were second on 10 points, with Jordan third on 7 points. 1. There were 2 driver changes heading into the race. J.J. Lehto replaced Joseph Verstappen at Benetton, the latter having replaced Lehto for the opening 2 races of the season due to an injury sustained by Lehto in preseason testing. Jordan's Eddie Irvine, still serving a 3-race suspension, was replaced with Andrea de Cesaris for this race. 2-3. On Friday 29 April, during the first qualifying session to determine the starting order for the race, 4, Rubens Barrichello, a driver for Jordan, hit a curb at the Variante Bassa corner at 225 km per hour, 140 miles per hour, launching him into the air. 5. He hit the top of the tire barrier, and was knocked unconscious by an impact measured at 95 grams. 6. Barrichello's car rolled several times after landing before coming to rest upside down. Medical teams treated him at the crash site, and he was taken to the circuit's medical center before being transferred to Maggiore Hospital in Bologna by helicopter for routine tests and observation to be carried out. 7. He returned to the race meeting the next day, although his broken nose and a plaster cast on his arm forced him to sit out the rest of the race weekend. 8. 10 years after the incident, Damon Hill, who drove for the Williams-Renault team at the time, described the feeling after the crash: "We all brushed ourselves off and carried on qualifying, reassured that our cars were tough as tanks and we could be shaken but not hurt." 9. Despite a spin, Senna was the fastest driver at the end of Friday's session with a time of 1:21.548, almost 0.5 of a second faster than Schumacher and Berger. Senna's teammate Damon Hill was 7th, having spun himself, over 1.6 seconds behind Senna. 20 minutes into the final qualifying session, Austrian driver Roland Ratzenberger failed to negotiate the Villeneuve Corvée in his Simtek. He subsequently hit the opposing concrete barrier wall almost head-on and was critically injured. Although the survival cell remained largely intact, the force of the impact inflicted a basal skull fracture. Ratzenberger, in his first season as a Formula One driver, had run over a curb at the Acque Minerali chicane on his previous lap, the impact of which is believed to have damaged his front wing. Rather than return to the pit lane, he continued on another fast lap. Traveling at 314 km per hour, 195 miles per hour, his car suffered a front wing failure, leaving him unable to control it. 10:11. The session was stopped while doctors attended to Ratzenberger. After initially being taken by ambulance to the on-circuit medical center, he was airlifted to Maggiore Hospital shortly after, the second driver to be admitted there during the weekend. The session was restarted approximately 25 minutes later, but several teams, including Williams and Benetton, took no further part. 12. Later in hospital, it was announced that Ratzenberger had died as a result of his multiple injuries. His death marked the first Formula One race weekend fatality since the 1982 Canadian Grand Prix when Riccardo Paletti was killed. It had been 8 years since Elio De Angelis died testing a Brabham car at the circuit Paul Ricard. 8. Professor Sid Watkins, then head of the Formula One on-track medical team, recalled in his memoirs Ayrton Senna's reaction to the news, stating that Ayrton broke down and cried on my shoulder. 13. Watkins tried to persuade Senna not to race the following day, asking, "What else do you need to do? You have been world champion 3 times, you are obviously the quickest driver. Give it up and let's go fishing." Senna replied, "Sid, there are certain things over which we have no control. I cannot quit, I have to go on." 13. Senna had qualified on pole position, having not set a lap time following Ratzenberger's death. 14. He was joined on the front row by Schumacher, and Berger qualified in third. Damon Hill was able to improve on his disastrous Friday session before the red flag, improving his time by 1 second and qualifying fourth as a result. A time posted by Ratzenberger before his fatal crash would have been sufficient for entry into the race starting from the 26th and final position on the grid. 2 drivers did not qualify, Pacific's Paul Belmondo, and the injured Barrichello, who was unable to race. 2. ESPN Speed World's race coverage on race day reported that Belmondo was offered the final position on the grid, but that he declined to take it out of respect for Ratzenberger, and on the grounds that he had not earned that race spot and Ratzenberger had.